Her Excellency Ms. Ingrid Johansson, Ambassador of Sweden in Pakistan, serving in Pakistan from May 2016. Sweden is seen as a benchmark in how to promote open societies and open governments due to its long history in freedom of the press and expression. Her Excellency Ms. Johansson is a strong advocate of human rights and believes that the ability to seek information and express your opinion is essential for democratic societies. Ms. Hina Rabbani Khar served as the 21st Foreign Minister of Pakistan from 2011 until March 2013. Appointed at age 33, she was the youngest person and the first woman to have held that position. In 2011, as the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, she visited India, where she signed a series of agreements to boost trade, security, culture and travel. She remains a member of the Pakistan People's Party and is a member of the National Assembly of Pakistan. She continues to advocate for better relations with India. Former Ambassador Umar Zakhalwal has held various positions in the Afghan government since the fall of the Taliban in 2001, including being the Minister of Finance under President Hamid Karzai from 2009 until 2015. He was Afghan ambassador to Pakistan, appointed in 2015 by President Ashraf Ghani. Mr. Zakhalwal continues to play an important role in peace talks between the Taliban and the United States. Fawzia Kufi is an Afghan parliamentary lawmaker and accomplished author. Her book is titled The Favored Daughter: One Woman's Fight to Lead Afghanistan into the Future. Kufi started her political career in 2001 when she began to promote a back-to-school campaign on rights of women to an education. Kufi studied in Pakistan and after the American invasion in 2001 got a job with UNICEF in Kabul. Her husband died in 2003 of tuberculosis he had contracted in a Taliban prison, leaving her to look after their two daughters. Kufi joined politics in 2005 and won by a landslide in both the 2005 and 2010 elections. Since she became a national figure, Kufi has survived several assassination attempts. She advocates for the rights of women, children and for democracy. Fawzia Kufi is one of the only women who attended the first round of negotiations with the Taliban in Moscow in February. Bhavani Fonseca from Sri Lanka is a human rights lawyer and senior researcher for transitional justice issues at Center for Policy Alternatives. She has 12 years of work experience as a constitutional and human rights lawyer in Sri Lanka. She is a published author on human rights, minority rights, humanitarian and rule of law issues. Fonseca is involved in national and international advocacy. Hello and a very warm welcome. Thank you so much for joining us at the Munizae Jahangir conference. We should talk about women's roles in politics and women's role in and women's abilities to find peaceful solutions and solutions for peace, not just in South Asia but across the world. We know that women have played an instrumental role in trying to find solutions. So today our topic is women building bridges for peace. Where are the opportunities? Where are the challenges? And how can we make use of those opportunities? I have already introduced my guests, and so now I will first ask Ambassador Ingrid Johansson. Sweden has a feminist foreign policy and it is the only government, the first feminist government in the world. Now what does that really mean, the first feminist government in the world?
2013, the Prime Minister declared his new incoming government as a feminist government. It was received by a lot of mixed reactions, and everything from a very positive response to giggling. Can this really be serious? Shouldn't government be doing something serious? But this is a very, very serious agenda. It's a development agenda, and it's an agenda to put Sweden on its toes by allowing all citizens, men, women, boys and girls, equal opportunity to shape society and their own lives. And obviously, our society doesn't look like that yet. We are very well ahead compared to the rest of the world, but still it doesn't look like that. A woman on average earns 82% of a man in a similar position, still. And you can go from sector to sector and see that there are gaps. And those are perceived as inefficiencies in our system and in our economy and our society. And in order to progress more, Sweden is a very advanced country. We're not even, in terms of population, we're not even the size of Lahore. We are 10 million. but we have a GDP that is 2 times Pakistan. But we still need to develop, and in order to do that, we must make sure that everyone with a talent, everyone that with an inclination to contribute can do that. That's what feminist policies are about.
And would you like to also explain how does the feminist policy affect foreign policy of Sweden?
Oh yes. Well, the world is not an equal place, as we know. And therefore, we also try to pursue a Swedish feminist foreign policy. And we try in all our policies to have a systemic gender perspective. And that goes into our efforts for peace, our efforts for security, trade, and development. And simply, the state is for the citizens. All citizens put in their resources and into the state. Therefore, everyone should benefit on an equal basis. And if we can somehow contribute to this globally, we build a more stable society for ourselves. So there's also a level of selfishness in this. And simply, I think it's very, very, very simple. There is no sustainable peace, security, or development if you exclude half of the population.
That's very interesting, and I'll take that thought from you and go on to Fawzia Kufi. A very warm welcome to Lahore. You come from Afghanistan, from now a very troubled place and a country that is now in transition. And what the ambassador said here was that we have to go beyond borders in order to ensure that women are included. Now, you were one of the few women politicians, in fact perhaps the only one, who was included in the negotiations or the talks with the Taliban, between the Taliban and the United States. You were in Moscow. We are very concerned as the world community that you yourself and women of your country will be left out of this, and they will be the first, their rights will be the first to be compromised on when it comes to a peace negotiations. We already have some information that the Taliban have said that women cannot be a president, that women cannot be a judge, that women cannot be a judge when there are murder proceedings. So please give us some understanding of what is happening and how far has space already been ceded when it comes to women's rights.
We have legitimate concerns in Afghanistan when it comes to the women's rights, and I think women of Afghanistan have the right to have those concerns. The concerns actually comes from the experience that women of Afghanistan have faced during the civil war and during Taliban. During Taliban, as you all know, more than we do, that women were deprived of their basic rights. The rights to be recognized as equal right, as human being, basically. So the concerns are that we might be taken back to those kind of the dark period of our history. Because, you know, the women movement in Afghanistan did not start post-Taliban. We have a long history of women participation in politics, social life, poetry, art. When you talk about women's rights, the perspective, the common perspective is that women's rights only limited to violence against women and issues related to women, which I think women's rights is a much wider issue of national security, yes, of economy, of many issues that the population actually is worried about. Women's rights is about that. So I decided to be part of this, because that is something that my people are suffering from. And that is something that women were deprived of being part of it. You know, we have this famous, probably all of the women have this experience, that when they make the decision about peace or peace security issues, they say, well, when the important decisions are made, we will inform you as women. This is what I have experienced. We are 55% of the population, but in terms of the quality, we are silent majority that needs to be represented.
Yes. Let me ask you a hard question. And I must say, it's commendable for a woman to be even in politics in Afghanistan, because it's not easy. And I've seen you in Afghanistan against all odds. But when you do go to these negotiations, is women's rights even a concern?
I must say that you're right. In two dialogues that happened in Moscow, I was one of the two women that attended, among, of course, many men. But in Doha, the last time in July, we were 11 out of 60, so the quantity increased. But I think for me, yes, the quantity matters, because that's the beginning of participation. If you ensure the quality is there, you have to make sure that it starts with participation and with quantity. For me, the quality was important, and I think I must proudly say we have Minister Jahangir who was here, and then of course with their support and with other men support, we managed to bring women's rights as the core issue for discussion. In every statement that was made from the Afghan politician to the Taliban, they referred in a way to the women's rights. And then the second thing was that because it's a matter of concern not only for us but for our international partners, that women should not go back, and for our neighbors and for everybody who cares about Afghanistan, about women's rights, the issue of women was one of the major issues for discussion. Now, I'm not saying that because it was a major issue for discussion, we are very happy and satisfied with what was discussed conceptually. Right. No, I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is that from the ignorance that we experienced 20 years back, now bring this issue to a major issue for discussion, I think that was an achievement. So
that's a big step forward, and I congratulate you for that. Former Ambassador Jahangir, you have been in direct negotiations with the Taliban, so you know what they are demanding. There has been many articles written, and there has been many speculation that they have already asked that women should not be made president, so our friend over here can never contest a presidential election, that women cannot be judges. Have the US authorities or the Afghan government agreed to this, and how far are you willing to go for peace, to compromise? I mean, will you compromise on women's rights, and how far will you go?
It was Fawzia Kufi who pushed them in Moscow, and not just any Talib leader, but a former Chief Justice of the Taliban. He responds and he says, there is now within the Taliban, their thinking is there's absolutely no restrictions on women education. There could be anybody. There could be a doctor, there could be an engineer, there could be a pilot, there could be anything. That there is no restriction in their thinking on women's political participation. The only 3 jobs. One is head of state, one is not any judge, could be judge, but a judge that presides over murder cases, but women would not want to do anyway. And then the third was, there was a third one as well, to become imam of masjid.
To be clear, you're still in the middle of negotiations, and you have not come to any...
We are in a dialogue right now.
You're in a dialogue.
There's going to be negotiations, and we should remain optimistic that things that we can defend, we should defend. We should not be afraid of, to discuss.
Does the United States or you, the Afghan people, have any red lines when it comes to women's rights? Well,
of course, there are, all these things are, women's lives from E to Z should all be red lines. No doubt we are in Islamic society that women themselves also accept that, keeping in mind sort of our Islamic ethics and values and all that. But within that, of course, we are, even in Pakistan, we are constrained in that, and in Afghanistan certainly are. But within those, there, of course, everything else.
Both in Pakistan and Afghanistan, and perhaps many other South Asian countries, where we keep on talking about the past as a gloriful, glory time, and remembering the Kabul that used to be in the 60s and the Pakistan that used to be in the 70s, and look back constantly for glorification, and unable to see it in the present, and perhaps through policy change even project it in the future. So yes, I'm very concerned.
former Foreign Minister Inarabani Khar, are you concerned about what is happening in Afghanistan? Because a lot of people believe that whatever happens in Afghanistan with the women of Afghanistan will have a direct impact on the women in Pakistan, especially in neighboring Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, because women over here have suffered in the past. We face our own demons. And with the Taliban in some kind of a position of making government there in the next few years, what impact would it have on women here in Pakistan?
Okay, Munizae, first of all, I think just taking a few steps back, I think it would be in the correctness of things to say I'm concerned about more than what is just happening in Afghanistan within the South Asian and even the Pakistani context. Both in Pakistan and Afghanistan and perhaps many other South Asian countries where we keep on talking about the past as a gloriful, glory time, and remembering the Kabul that used to be in the 60s and the Pakistan that used to be in the 70s, and look back constantly for glorification and unable to see it in the present and perhaps through a policy change even project it in the future. So yes, I'm very concerned, and so I think it's really, really important that in the entire region we are able to just be exceptionally forward-looking and understand, have the ability to learn some lessons from history, be able to learn from some of the mistakes that we made in the past, and you know how the peace talks, because as the ambassador is saying, I don't think we're even at a point where we can call it peace talks. We're talking about withdrawal talks, we're talking about the dialogue. Beginning of a dialogue process, and then we've seen the dialogue process going all the way, almost reached Camp David, and then some stable genuses come in and things change, right? So it really depends on how this is going to play out, but yes, make no mistake, it will have an impact on Pakistan, on everything that happens in Pakistan.
All right. Well, Bhavani, a very, very warm welcome to Lahore. Your experience has been largely in Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka is the place where Sahar was born, South Asian for Human Rights, and that was a platform which was used to bring together women across South Asia to promote peace and good relations between neighbors. And Sri Lanka has also been a place where we cannot have conferences, as we have seen in at this conference as well. There were people who were not allowed to come in. By the way, our Indian guests never really got visas. So Sri Lanka has been a host to a lot of these gatherings and conferences where we get together. What has been your experience in Sri Lanka, and how do you think that there are opportunities for peace with women in policy making positions in South Asia?
Sahar is a very good example where South Asians came together to have critical discussions in terms of looking forward, having a common vision, a common engagement, and that continues. I mean, Munizae Jahangir, I think we all love and look to, because she played such a critical role. And if you ask anyone in South Asia, she had such a presence. So like that, I think we have a lot of women in Sri Lanka, in India, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in Bangladesh, who play such a big role in creating a space. Creating a space to have conversations, creating a space where we are safe to have conversations. Because let's also remember there is various gendered forms of violence. And that is something many South Asians and across the world we face on a daily basis, on a regular basis. And in Sri Lanka most recently we had the unfortunate incidents of the Easter Sunday attacks, where over 200 people were killed, many more injured. And I think after a decade of peace, we were reminded how fragile peace is. The fragility of the peace, the tenuous nature. So the security came up a lot. We had emergency. I mean, I'm a lawyer. I challenge, go to courts and challenge these. So people like Asma showed us speaking truth to power is so critical. And Sahar and so many other regional platforms where Sri Lanka has been a space to have those, have shown even with more recent threats and challenges. And I hope we can engage with our Afghanistan colleagues as well to show that even with decades of violence, we find those spaces. We have to keep those spaces. And remembering that internationally we have various frameworks. We have 1325, we have the various international human rights, bills of rights. So very much those conversations are there. It's for us to really find those spaces and keep pushing those spaces.
A big component of this discussion is the resolutions. Ambassador, I would come back to you and ask you that in South Asia right now, security threat is something that is of concern in Sri Lanka, as my friend here said, in India, in Afghanistan, of course, in Pakistan. And that always becomes the centerpiece of a discussion. And everything else kind of is compromised around it. So women are in a difficult position, as my friend Fawzia Kufi there told us. Where can then they maneuver a space for themselves? Where are the platforms? Where are the opportunities to build bridges for peace?
And you want me to tell you?
No, we want you to reflect.
Yes. This has been my main reflection since I arrived in Pakistan 3 years ago. For us, it's development. Development is the narrative. Development is sort of the narrative on which we build our role in the world and build our society. So I understand why, and I know why the security narrative is so strong here. It's obvious why. But I do wish that somehow it's impossible to sort of start up sort of a parallel discussion, because I think these are so strongly interlinked. Development offers security to people. Development is individual as much as for the society as a whole. It's the feeling of security and the sense of development within the individual that builds the society and the stability of the society. So it really starts with basic things like literacy. Development debate is so much stronger. Provided the current literacy rate in Pakistan, I'm so surprised there's not a sense of emergency. They're actually dropping, and I don't know of many countries in the world where that is happening. Functioning countries, I would say. And that worries me. That worries me a great deal. That is not on the, how to say, picked up by people in decision-making sort of positions, because that's really where it starts. I believe less in that regard. I believe in socioeconomic empowerment to building stability throughout the region, actually, is equally important to negotiations of power distribution or setups like this. I think these two must happen parallel.
I visited villages and areas where I could see an 18-year-old boy holding a gun, and the commander is so proud because he was able to kill 3 Taliban. Now, what will be the future of this child?
You bring an important point, Fawzia. I'll come to you. She says that socioeconomic development is absolutely essential. But in my country and your country, security eats up most of our budget. So where do you see the opportunities? I know the challenges, and they're very tough challenges for you. And how can the women of the world, you have 3 very powerful women sitting on this very podium, how can the women of the world help?
I totally agree with the ambassador in terms of the budget spent on military. The same as in Afghanistan. 60% of our budget goes to military, and the country has become so militarized, and we think that's the solution, because the more we inject on military, the more the response we get is back the fighting and war. And it's 4 point something, if I remember, the budget of course differs each year, but if I remember correctly, is on education. And we have less actually assess the impact of the psychological impact and the social impact of war on the future generation. And this is something that probably will be one of the major challenge ahead of us when we move forward on peace and reintegration, the reintegration of those Taliban that are actually fighting, and they are born in war, and they are grown up in war, and their life has found a meaning through war with a weapon. I have visited villages and areas where I could see an 18-year-old boy holding a gun, and the commander is so proud because he was able to kill 3 Taliban. Now, what will be the future of this child if war ends?
Yes.
So, and we have never looked at that aspect of war. And the same, I think, in some parts of Pakistan.
That's true.
It's very easy to spend millions of dollars in war and make advanced weapons, but when it comes to investing on the things that could stop future wars, that is education, that is providing opportunities, the investment is very slow. I fully agree.
So the opportunities are to put more money in socio-economic development rather than the war machinery. Former Ambassador Zakhalwal, do you agree? And really the concern is, what she's saying is that it has been so militarized over so many decades that now what will you do with this whole war machinery that's running, the economy that is being financed? What are you going to do with that? And also all these people who have grown up to be warriors, certainly something else must be found for them.
As long as there's war, security would be the biggest spender, and it's going to, of course, take away from spending on all
on building institutions,
others. Even well, it has impact on everything else, not just on spending in socio-economic. It has, you know, the larger governance, services, and all that. Earlier mentioned that 60, actually in Afghanistan it's over 70% of the budget that goes to security.
Do you feel that the way the war has gone on in Afghanistan, that there have been very less spent on institution building, and that has really been a failure of
it's
the world powers?
It's not just been the spending issue. When you have a war, then the whole concern and mindset, you know, is diverted toward that, and it takes away from everything else. In a war, it's certainly the institutions, not in terms of spending, but in terms of priority, are also affected. When it comes to life and death situation, so, you know, education becomes secondary, health becomes secondary.
So where are the opportunities now?
Well, the opportunity will have to be peace. That is what we need to grab upon. War we experienced for so long, and it's only getting worse. And there's a chain. I mean, again, if a few years ago you've asked me if peace with the Taliban was the right thing, I might have not been so. I remember Fawzi Kufi, that she was not a strong supporter of peace talks with the Taliban, but today she sits across with the Taliban because peace is the only option. So the mindset within the country is ready for peace. We do also see changes within the mindset of the Taliban for peace. So we need to grab on this opportunity. We need to bring peace. So peace remains the top opportunity for us.
Hina, Ambassador Zakhalwal talks about peace, but I've reported out of Afghanistan, and many women over there would say that peace should come, but not at the cost of fundamental freedoms, and it should not be peace of the graveyard.
Sure.
That's what they say. As a former foreign minister and somebody who has been engaged with India and Afghanistan and been part of bilateral, where do you say women taking on a role as policy makers to help what is really happening in Afghanistan? Because that is going to be a flashpoint where there will be extremism if it goes that way. And how do we stop it there, and how do we help women who have probably going to face the brunt of an extremist mindset.
Munizae, I think, I found myself at a unique place where I was not an externality to the debate or to the policy making on security and defense and foreign policy, which is generally considered to be a no-go area, as we have seen within South Asia for women, or has been. And I think things have changed rather drastically, and I take a lot of credit for the Pakistan People's Party and women like Munizae Jahangir, who've been like literally the beacon of light on things like this. And I think whether she's a man or a woman becomes immaterial in some ways. But I felt that being in places like that, as a woman, you have a different approach. I think God has made us somewhat differently. And as a woman, I felt I had the ability to have much more of a longer term perspective and not be bogged down with wanting to please people, with holding on to what I consider to be false and faulty narratives, and thus explaining myself to be, legitimately a legitimate politician in some ways, right, or someone who had the ability to defend the country's sovereignty, etc. I genuinely think that without really thinking about it, but I think I went back to trying to really want to change the narrative around how we look at our security, how we look at our countries, our countries, how people view our country, and how we view our country's strength. And I'll give you an example, because, for instance, when I was in the Foreign Office, I made a rule that we will not say anything against any neighbor in any speech by any prime minister, any president, any foreign minister, anyone. And I said, if anybody wants to say something against a neighbor, it has to pass through my desk. Okay, because what Salima Hashmi was mentioning in the previous session, art, literature, poetry, even the jokes that we crack, and especially the media, we're all creating a narrative which allows politicians the space to either be able to build the peace or talk the walk of war, right? And I'll just perhaps try and give you an example of a meeting that we had with President Zardari, who was the president then, and Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, where we said, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, you had said that you want Siachen to be converted into a mountain of peace, and here's your opportunity, and here we are saying that we are very convinced that we can do this, so let's go ahead with this. And he turned around and he said to the president that, Mr. President, things have changed. Public opinion in India will not allow it anymore. And I remember thinking, because typically as foreign minister, when two president and heads of state, heads of government are talking, you're supposed to keep sitting in your seat. And I remember I could not, I had to, I sort of, took the opportunity and said, but Mr. Prime Minister, I think leadership requires for you to build public opinion to be able to do the right thing, rather than follow public opinion to do the wrong thing.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
So that's what, I also want to say that, you see, the problem with positions is, for instance, take Pakistan and India, okay? Now, if we say that we are not going to compromise on our position or our territorial position, what are we actually saying? We're saying that we're never going to move forward. Because your position is your position, it may not reflect reality. I'm talking about the Indians and the Pakistanis and the Afghans and everyone else, right? If you're not able to really be forward-looking and be flexible for the sake of posterity and for the sake of the future that you want to build, rather than hold on to the past that you've inherited, you are forever going to be standing literally in quicksand and get deeper and deeper into a problem zone.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador Zakharwal. Thank you, Fawzia Kufi, Bhavani. Thank you very much, Ambassador Ingrid Johansson, former Foreign Minister Hinarabani Kar. Thank you very much. So the resolution, I think, from this particular panel is that if we want to fight and struggle for fundamental freedoms for women's rights, there has to be less spent on the security apparatus and more investment on socio-economic development so that women have a chance to prosper. There has to be peace, that is a prerequisite, there is no doubt about it, but there also has to be a building of bridges, and building of bridges with principles.